Even more so than the Avengers, the success of Guardians of the Galaxy in 2014 seemed to prove that the Marvel Cinematic Universe could do no wrong. So I don't think it's overstating things to say that Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 comes at sort of a crucial time for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's clear at this point that the MCU can do wrong. Its popularity is definitely on the wane. At the same time, James Gunn, the director of these movies, already has more than one foot out the door to go be the co-head of DC Studios, Marvel's competitor. In that way, Guardians 3 kind of feels like both a model and a warning for the MCU as it closes the door, at least for now, on these characters. And there are two scenes that I think really capture that. One is the end of an early set piece where the Guardians are committing this break-in on a space station that is made entirely out of organic material, and it's extremely gross and weird. This space station that has skin and hair and flesh and pustules, and they've broken into that, and the set inside is this glorious bit of throwback 60s sci-fi. The costumes that they're wearing seem like variations of the spacesuits in 2001, and also very much in line with the original series Star Trek style costumes. And they're on practical sets, wearing weird practical costumes, and it's all these bizarre aliens, and all of the Guardians are fighting these guys, and then Groot smashes a spaceship into the station while playing 70s make-out funk. It's a gloriously weird scene. The other scene that I think captures the tone of Guardians 3 is the first proper scene in which Rocket Raccoon, voiced by Bradley Cooper here, sings along to an acoustic version of Creep by Radiohead while kind of moping his way around nowhere, the Guardians' new space station. It's these two tones that Guardians 3 seems to bounce back and forth between, and that's going to work really well for some people, and it's not going to work for others. Because on the one hand, yeah, we've got the big goofy superhero action, and all of that stuff I think is just wonderful. It's wonderful in part because, again, there are great practical effects here. It's not all CG. It's just boundless imagination and boundless colors. We get cool aliens. We get fantastic sets like those that I've never seen before. We get neat costumes and extremely well-crafted scenes of action. You know, one of the best scenes in the movie comes pretty late on, and it's a typical superhero scene at this point. It's a fake digital oneer where the camera floats around as each of the members of the team are doing their thing fighting bad guys. And as rote as that sounds, Gunn stages it so that it feels like a splash page from a comic book. You can clearly see what each character is doing. Their movements are related to their character, and so it is character building, it's personality building. All of the beats are exciting and funny and storytelling, and it meshes well with the music. Look, it is easily the best sequence in which a schlubby guy, played by Chris Pratt, all of a sudden does really cool moves in a oneer CG shot set to No Sleep Till Brooklyn. Gunn is so good because he uses these characters not as straight adaptation. He's not really interested in taking the characters from the comics and giving you scenes from the comic. Think something like Thor: Love and Thunder, directly ripping panels from Esad Ribic and Jason Aaron's run on Thor. That's just copy and paste. Gunn's not doing that. He's being inspired by these things, and he's adding his own twist to it. It feels like he's part of the narrative and still retaining his own voice. That's the best that you can ask for with a superhero movie. The other thing, though, this mopey rocket story marks what you can do with a superhero movie. I talk a lot in my superhero movie rankings about my distaste for this idea of realism in superhero movies. I don't like the idea of trying to make movies about people who put on bright, shiny spandex and have crazy powers. I don't want that to feel grounded because I just feel like that looks ridiculous. And I think that's a narrow understanding of what we mean by realism. realism can be what would happen in the real world that's governed by our physics and our understanding of humanity and so on. But realism can also be philosophical realism and emotional realism. And that's what we get here with Guardians 3. Yes, its primary emotional character arc is that of a genetically modified raccoon looking back on his origins at the hands of an abusive leader called the High Evolutionary, played by Chukwudi Iwuji. But how would an anthropomorphized raccoon think and feel if he had gone through that experience? What would that trauma look like? What would it feel like if he was frolicking around with his friends, a mutated walrus, a mutated bunny, a mutated otter, all of which that have these weird scars and these horrific metal limbs grafted onto their bodies? What is that emotional realism? And the movie gives us that. That is realistic because it's something you can relate with. It's something that you understand, albeit happening in this weird world. And nothing captures that better than Chukwudi Iwuji's character, the High Evolutionary himself. In this movie, he is an alien geneticist who is obsessed with creating the perfect world. He sees the world as missing God, and therefore he's going to come in and perfect what God screwed up. All of us know what it's like to question God, of course, but none of us know what it's like to be a super geneticist. But this movie gives us that. And Iwuji never scrimps on the Shakespearean dramatics. He is mesmerizing in every scene. But as over the top and insane as that is, there's still a truth to it that we can relate with. That's the type of realism that you can do in a superhero movie. I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy 2 is partially about learning to accept your fathers as flawed human beings and being your own person. That's played out in a conversation between space gods. And the other part is coming to understand that your friends won't abandon you, and therefore you don't need to push them away. And this is a realization that happens in a conversation between a space raccoon and a space redneck. There's nothing quite that complex going on in the main emotional arc of Guardians 3, but it does work and it is satisfying. The other arcs are a little bit underplayed. In particular, all of the main cast get something to do. You know, Drax and Mantis are teamed up, and by this time, especially after the holiday special, we know how funny Dave Bautista and Pom Klementieff are together. They're just as enjoyable here. Peter Quill, strangely, gets very little to do, and Vin Diesel gets a little bit of a spin on his one line, but really they're just kind of doing the usual old Star-Lord and Groot things. And Karen Gillan is, of course, great. There's not really an arc there. Perhaps out of the main cast, the one that gets the most to do here is, unsurprisingly, Zoe Saldana as Gamora, because she is playing an earlier version, and there's some really interesting stuff there about your expectations that you place on your friends or lovers in the case of Star-Lord, and this sort of mature moving on. I didn't have a problem with the sort of shortchanging of the side characters to really emphasize on Rocket's arc, nor did I have a problem with how incredibly bleak this is. Because it is kind of gory, and it is kind of nasty, and it is kind of bleak, and I know that might not work for some people. But for me, fundamentally, it shows what kind of stories you can tell if you're going to do superhero movies. That means that you have to let people have their voice. Guardians shows that you can still do interesting things within the Marvel Universe with Marvel characters, taking advantage of all of these decades of excellent creators doing weird stuff if you let these directors have their voice. And so I can't help but leave Guardians 3 thinking this is both a warning and a lesson for the MCU. The lesson is, if you let interesting artists play in your sandbox and tell a story in their idiosyncratic way, you're going to get interesting, compelling takes on these characters that you have. The warning is, if you continue doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, people are going to get tired of it. It's going to be diminishing returns, and the public appetite for superhero movies is going to die. So I really do hope that Marvel takes this warning, and I feel like Guardians 3 is overall a satisfying close to the Gunn era of Marvel movies.